Well, now to tonight's interview with the British author Martin Amis. His latest novel, The House of Meetings, is set in Russia during the time of the gulags. But the twin subjects of terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism have been occupying his mind a fair bit recently. He's written a short story called The Last Days of Mohammed Atta, which attempts to get inside the mind of the operational leader of the September 11 attacks. And in a recent essay penned for The Observer before the anniversary of those attacks, he traces the roots of Islamic extremism and critiques the West's hesitant response to it. The essay was called The Age of Horrorism, and the themes it unravels have a particular relevance in Australia today because of the fierce debate over the Ramadan sermon by the Mufti of Australia, a diatribe in which the Sheikh describes women as Satan's soldiers wielding the weapons of seduction and suggests those who don't wear the veil and stay at home behind closed doors are uncovered meat and may be complicit in their own rapes. Well, Martin Amis joins us now in our London studio. Thank you for being there.
Pleasure.
Now, you clearly don't think the word terrorism adequately describes the Islamist assault on the West. You've coined your own word, horrorism. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice distinction, I think. When you're on your sleigh going through Siberia and you hear a wolf howl, that's fear or concern. When the wolf is pounding after your vehicle, then that's terror. And horror is when the wolf is actually there. I think Islamism has turned up the dial of terror so that it becomes horrific. That is their signal achievement so far.
Your essay takes us back to the very roots of Islamism after the First World War, a time you call the Great Leap Backwards. How and why did that happen?
I think Second World War. It begins with Sayyid Qutb, this amazingly repressed and lustful thinker, so-called, who came to America in 1948, 49, and didn't like it. I've been thinking recently that perhaps I think Islamism is the death agony of imperial Islam, the final twitch in that exploration. But I also think it was very much connected with the formation of the State of Israel and the defeat of 6 Arab armies simultaneously. I think this was the final straw to Islam's dreams of regaining its primary place on the planet, which it enjoyed for a good 200 or 300 years. It is now powerless, and this is an attempt to kind of flip the whole thing and regain God's favor, because the feeling behind all this is that the covenant with God has been broken, that Islam used to be sustained by the argument from manifest success, and what's replaced that in the last couple of hundred years is the argument from manifest failure. God has smiled on the infidels, and this is the apocalyptic hurt of the Islamist.
Sayyid Qutb, who you're talking about there, you say effectively wrote the Mein Kampf of Islamism. Within it, there are very interesting psychological traits which emerge, and you exploit them in your essay to describe a man who appears to be both obsessed with and repulsed by Western sexual mores. How significant do you think those issues were for him, and how do those themes go on into Islamism today?
I think it lies very close to the heart of it. The patriarchal superiority of the male is the last bastion of Islam, and it's that horrifies them about modernity. That is the key thing. You may be interested to know that in the training camps in Afghanistan, you'll spend the morning learning about suicide bombing, and the afternoon will be spent with acids and asphyxiants and so on. But the rest of the day is propaganda about how women are, as your Mufti pointed out, are the troops of the devil. Instilling hatred of women is the other twin pillar of the Islamist project.
You seem to be suggesting in the case of Saeed Qutb that his mind in effect was poisoned by a few encounters with American women.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hilarious. It reads like Pale Fire, a Nabokov novel where, you know, the narrator's self-knowledge is less than zero. It's almost as if self-examination of any kind is unmanly, unvirtuous, unrighteous. And there he is, clearly boiling with lust for these wanton American women as he sees them. He's always talking about their bursting hips and their bulging breasts and their thirsty lips. And when he does write about it, he goes into a kind of frenzy of hellfire, although he died a virgin. I mean, it's embarrassing to say so, but it does seem to be male insecurity, on steroids.
Flowing from all of this, you outline his chief tenets, that America is controlled by Jews, that Americans themselves are infidels and animals unworthy of life. I mean, how much of that goes back, do you think, to that psychological portrait you've just painted of him?
Well, I think it's a sort of displacement. The whole hatred of America is not only irrational but also very abstract. I don't know about Australia, but in England, people are still floundering around and talking respectfully about the reasons for Islamist rage and so on, as if it's just business as usual and ticking off a few historical grievances and, us in Iraq, us in Afghanistan. What hasn't been grasped is that this isn't a rationalist project. We keep attributing reason to them, but they don't boast of it themselves. Throw reason to the dogs was one of the Taliban's great slogans. We think they're reacting to things, and they're not. The energy is coming from an ideology that's being grafted onto a religion, and it's an ideology, like all the most dangerous ones, that allows you to be at once very violent and very righteous.
Of course, some of the ideology and the core bits of it are distorted but still drawn from the Quran. You make the point yourself, the very last line of the Quran is a line about the seductive power of Satan.
Yes, that's what's meant by Khomeini in Iran, his emphasis on the great Satan. It's the great tempter. Now we find ourselves in the West in the position of finding out that our whole society, everything you see around you, all those buildings, all those institutions, all that culture, is there for the sole purpose of tantalizing good Muslims, and that's their main beef.
Your short story about Mohammed Atta, the operational chief of the September 11 attacks, draws these things out into a fictional account of what it's like inside his head in the final day, in the final hours, in fact, before the attack. How hard was it to actually do that, and how close do you think you got, and what sources were you relying on apart from your own imagination?
Well, I read everything I could find about Mohammed Atta. But I took an enormous liberty in that I made him an apostate rather than a religious maniac, which is probably what he was, almost certainly what he was. I did that for purely utilitarian reasons, in that it would have bored me blind to look into the mind of someone who was fanatically religious. So I make him a cynic who's there just for the killing. And I wanted to emphasize that it's a secret no longer well kept, that killing people is tremendously empowering and exciting. And we must never lose sight of the fact that this is, like other movements that we're familiar with, Nazism and Bolshevism, this is an ideology that has freed itself from reason, and you get a huge push when you do that, because suddenly everything is possible. And it's freed itself from reason, and it's feeding on death. Now, this is what people find so difficult to it's effortful to come to an understanding of that. Much nicer to wallow in rationalist naivety and say that it's our fault. In England, there were middle-class whiteys walking around during August with signs saying, "We are all Hezbollah now." Well, enjoy it. Enjoy being Hezbollah while you can, because its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, famously said of the West, he said, "We don't want anything from you, we just want to eliminate you."